MVP is just to get your product out quick. So we're going to go through this PowerPoint or this presentation. If y'all have any questions, feel free to chime in. If you have any answers, that's what we're looking for. It's just a discussion. And then after that, we're just going to move into talking about projects, tech stacks, resumes. If you have something that you want to get reviewed or talk about with us, let's do it. That's kind of the goal of this meeting. So our goal is to talk about bootstrapping tech. We're going to talk about building MVPs, your general dev tools and frameworks, low-cost development options, AWS, and how you can optimize that, just some tips and tricks, and then some low-code, no-code solutions. And then we're just going to do a little workshop. So a little introduction. Hispanic Hackers is a nonprofit organization of 2,700 now developers, engineers, and entrepreneurs. Our goal is to make the tech industry more accessible to Latino and Hispanic people, and really just bring community to what we do here in Austin. We've been wanting to expand and grow, but right now we're Austin focused. And so we are looking for volunteers and people who are interested to get more involved. So if y'all have any interest, feel free to reach out anytime. But we partner with a couple different organizations and companies, Foundry being our free tech bootcamp, Circle Square being one of our sponsors. It's a no-code or consultation service for development and engineering. And then we have Capital Factory, which sponsors our location. And Capital Factory is a co-working spot. There's a lot of networking opportunities here, and then they can also get you connected with investors, advisors, all different kinds of resources for your progress and journey as a startup. So we're going to start off by talking about MVPs. Now, before we start talking about this, what kind of, we've heard Mario is working on a more hardware-oriented electronics project. William, what are you working on?
I'm finishing my AI machine learning certification.
Nice.
It has been a while since I coded, quite a while.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to learn more about this and
get your foot in the door. That makes sense. And what languages do you use what languages are you learning in your certification?
It's all Python.
Okay, nice.
Some people have used R, but we have not really learned R. It's all Python.
Sweet. And using TensorFlow or PyTorch? Okay.
It's a basic certification. It's mostly for data scientists.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. I did a specialization in AI when I was in college, so that's where I kind of got my foot in the door. But it's you really gotta get in there and understand. The theory's the hardest, realistically. What's your name?
My name is V.
Zvi?
V. Yeah.
V. Ah, nice to meet you.
I think that we used to meet.
Oh, you came to, was it like a year ago?
We used to meet, not only one.
Okay, got you. What, you're back end, right?
No, I just done a little bit for now.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't know how to go back in.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So, what is your goal? We're just doing kind of an informal meeting today, so, what's your goals long term? What do you want to get out of this meeting?
So I just joined for to learn anything that I can do, like that's teaching. I usually want to see, and I do understand that maybe this workshop is about how to build a complete MVP.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I have that demand here.
Okay, nice.
As a
Yeah, we'll also talk about low-code options, so that's super helpful as well, especially in your case, where in terms of coding, if you're not a huge back-end person, there's Bubble.io and a couple other, I think it's Framer is another low-code option, and we can explore that a little bit more too. And then Mario, I know you are here just for general tech or general coding?
Yeah, just learning whatever I can just to ship something. Now, I'm working with other companies right now, but I like to work on something when I'm not doing that. So.
Nice. And hi, we haven't met. I'm Andres. What's your name?
Chukwudi, but I go by Chuk for short. Came here, sorry for your late by the way. Came here just to learn. theme was interesting.
Yeah.
And haven't been in this room in a while as well. So that's about it. My background, I'm a journalist. I've been a founder before, built
Nice.
software before, built services business before, ran accelerators for like idea to unicorn stage founders, where either we were helping them get investment, or we were helping the next 2 to 5 enterprise customers from Fortune 100 companies. So that's me.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So essentially what I've introduced is this is because we have fewer people today. It's just going to be really informal, really relaxed. If y'all have any ideas or thoughts and want to talk about it, feel free to shout it out, pitch it in. We're going to talk a little bit about building MVPs for low cost. And then we're going to kind of transition into a bit of a workshop where we just talk about y'all's ideas, what it means to build an MVP, and how we can get y'all's projects the love that they need. So essentially, we're talking about building MVPs. MVP is a minimum viable product, which is a simplified version of your idea, solves a simple project or problem, and you can build it with a minimal or at least reasonable time frame, right? So like you're not trying to solve everything. You're not trying to build a castle. You're just trying to build a door. So essentially, you want to create something that's testable and you can get user feedback so that then you can go and cycle to getting investment or moving into refining that product. So why MVPs are important and why they work is they validate your assumptions. You have an idea and you say, hey, look, I think that this would sell. But you don't know yet until you actually have that tested by customers, until they look at it and say, you know what, I would buy that product, or I would invest in that product. They also save time, money, and energy because you're not spending all your effort into building a full-fledged product before you know it's going to work. You can get early feedback, and you avoid building features that will build up tech debt or features that nobody wants. So really, it's just about creating something minimal. Yes?
Can you define tech debt?
Tech debt. So tech debt is where you get way in over your head in code or some kind of technological, part of your product. So say you head down this pipeline and then you realize that you've built everything wrong, right? For example, like when I was in high school, I thought I knew everything about coding. So I tried building this app. Turns out I built all of the user authentication in the front end on the client side. So everything authenticating the user was exposed at the front. So all the keys, all of the back and forth, there was no encryption involved. And then somebody came up to me and said, look, like you can't just have your keys, your API keys right there in the front end, because then somebody's just going to use your API without your authentication. They're just going to pretend to be users that they aren't. That's tech debt, because I had this whole application under the basis that I had an effective login system. Finding out that my login system was completely flawed broke the product. And so then you have to go ahead and refactor your code. You have to change up your authentication scheme, and that takes time. And if you have an extensively built product, which myself, I had spent months building this product, and all of a sudden I have to go through all my messy code, and yes, I'm a high schooler, so obviously I didn't use linting or code comments or anything that builds effective code. That's tech debt.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of y'all have experienced tech debt before. You can get in over your head pretty quick. So your goal is to really build a product, but build the very basics so that you don't get into tech debt, so that you can keep it surface level while also having the core features in place. And then once you have investment or funding to hire the right people to advise, the thing is, I recently talked to a mentor of mine, and he said, you always want to have people who are smarter than you in the room. And that's the key when you're a founder. That's the key when you're working in a company. No matter what, you want to have somebody who knows something more than you. Because when you can hire that kind of talent, they can give you insight that you wouldn't know, right? Like you could know, if I had that kind of advice when I was building this product in high school, I could have sensed out, look, you've got to do this and this and this not to get in over your head. So the whole point of building an MVP is so that you can build it simply, and then you can get the investment, you can get the advice, you can get the guidance from people who you have to pay to get that advice from later on in later stages. So building MVPs, how to build a great one. You want to identify your core value and the core problem that you're solving. You want to cut out everything else, everything that makes it kind of fancy, right? You can make the interface, if the interface is a big part of it, if that's part of your draw, you want to make the interface better. Say you're doing something, but it looks nicer. That's still a value add. So I'm not saying take out the beauty in your interface. I'm not saying, cut out portions that would be important, like say user authentication, but I am saying take out the next steps, right? Because everybody thinks, okay, I think this would be cool. And this would also be cool. The also you don't need. You just need the base. Hey, how's it going?
All right, how you doing?
It's going well. So you want to cut out all the extra fluff. You want to build with as fast as you can. Speed is the important thing because you really want to get your MVP done so that you can get advice and you can keep moving forward. Launching and learning, the whole point is to get user feedback and get advice from professionals, and you want to iterate as fast as possible because the whole goal is just to get to that final step. Most important takeaways, you want to get early advice and start your plan for efficient growth. So that means getting investor approval early, getting guidance from advisors, so really getting plugged into networks like Hispanic Hackers and like other networks out here in Austin for growth is very helpful because you can get professional advice early on versus later on when you might be at a loss. And then there are processes where you can go through accelerators, you can go through different programs that will get you the right connections. You also want to keep your time to market scalable, iterative, and proportional to your resources. So what this means is you want to make sure that your first time to market is quick, right? It's something that you can do on your own with a co-founder or two, and that is reasonable to get done. The typical goal is within a year, within your runway time. So say you take a whole year off work to work on a startup. You want that product done before that year ends, right? You want it done earlier. You want it done 6 months before that year ends, because if you only have a year of runway, what if you don't get there in 6 months? So you want it to be scalable where you know how much runway you have and you can get it done before the deadline of your runway. But also the main thing is you want iterative growth. So you want to be able to start off small, make it to that first milestone. And then the next milestone, the next time to get to your next milestone is going to be a little bit longer because it's going to be growing off of the previous effort, but you'll also hopefully have gained more resources to be able to make it longer. And then make it proportional to your resources, so your resources should be increasing as you build. So MVP is just that first stage. So you're starting off from very little resources and you're trying to get to that next step. Most ideas die because of costs. So you got to figure out what your cost, the cost of building your product will be and scaling your product will be before you buy in and before investors buy in. And so that's the other goal of MVPs is investors got to know why it's important and how much it's going to cost to scale before they buy in. So this is a quick diagram of what startups usually need. In here, you don't have like workspaces, because a lot of startups operate remotely. A lot of them don't need a core location. But startups require capital or investment to get off the ground. They require co-founders or talent, guidance, time, and MVP or product. And so the main thing I want to highlight here, capital investment is not your first step. Your first step is really getting talent. Again, I recently talked with a mentor of mine, and he said he never invests in a company with a single founder, and he never starts a company by himself. You can't do things alone, and that's something that I've been learning over time, because you try to enter into a startup and build a startup on your own, and you get stuck at a roadblock. Because honestly, maybe you do have the talent to do every single role yourself, but it'll take a really long time for you to do everything by yourself. You have to juggle too many hats, and honestly, you need somebody to handle one end while you're doing the other. So finding where your strength lies, very important. I'm personally a technical founder, so I work best when I'm working with code or I'm designing a product, I'm architecting something. Everybody has their own niche, so if you're going to work in AI or mechanical, or you're going to work more on the founding aspect, there are different roles for everybody, but having a co-founder is super crucial. Additionally, time. Every MVP or every product takes time to develop, and if you're taking time off work, that's important to build it out. Then you have your MVP or product. A lot of founders or technical founders try to build it out themselves, but a lot also hire dev shops. Something we can explore later on in the meeting is also how much it costs to hire outside of the US, how much dev shops get paid, and how much engineers outside of the US get paid. I recently did a whole statistical analysis on how much a engineer or developer should get paid, both in the US and abroad. It's super interesting to investigate, and it's not foolproof, but it is based off of statistics, and the economic power that engineers have in each country varies.
Do you have that research shared online anywhere, or are you going to share that during the session?
I could share it during the session. I don't publicize it online because I don't want to be held to it and liable in case somebody comes and says, well, this says this, right? And then the other thing is, it is somewhat proprietary. It's not 100%. It's all can be found online, but it's something that took a lot of work. But I can definitely share it with y'all. Additional parts of the cost of building a startup are the actual dev tools and infrastructure. Every app needs to get hosted somewhere. Apps need tools, right? You can't build out everything yourself. You can build out an email client, but even the email client needs a engine behind it, right? You need AWS SES to bring in the SMTP, which allows you to actually send the emails. So you need those external tools, and those external tools do end up costing you money. The goal of this meeting is to talk more on the level of dev tools and infrastructure that you can get your application or your product off the ground with, rather than talking about the rest of this. But it's also exceptionally helpful to have guidance. Having a group of advisors and people who you trust, who you've actually built a relationship with in the past, is exceptionally helpful. And coming to meetings like these at Capital Factory or elsewhere is super great for that. I know that there are a couple different networks, especially for Latino and Hispanic people, but just in general out there, such as us, Hispanic Hackers, there's Techeria, there's Latinas in Tech, there's Autumn HQ. There's a lot of different groups that do professional building, networking, and development for the tech scene out here in Austin, especially for people of color. And then you have capital or investment. This is kind of the last phase, but once you've created your MVP, you want to be able to show that off to investors and move it and perpetuate it, unless you're bootstrapping, which is what we're talking about here. Is bootstrapping means I'm pulling myself up by my bootstraps, and I am self-funding. So all of my initiatives I'm doing on my own. I'm trying to get other people who are buying in based off of equity or just pure belief, because I see it fit to build this product, and I think that it'll be a good investment in my life. So capital and investment comes last once you have these things, and these are a very broad. This is a very broad look at what capital or investment firms look for when they are being showcased a product. So as we said, startup projects need a problem. What are you solving? Who experiences the product or the problem? So you've got to really investigate the market and find product market fit, which means, hey, I found a niche or an area where I can improve this industry. I can improve this problem for people. So, for example, Mario has a tool for being able to, it's an automatic wrench for tight spaces. That is a niche product. And you got to find out where does it fit within the landscape of power tools and micro power tools or handheld power tools, and how do I sell that to fit this problem. And so then you look at the user who's going to use this product. Is it just my target market? Is it outside of that? Is it something that I could sell to a larger company? And are they accessible for feedback and testing? So that's really getting the product in households for testing or in the hands of your user and getting their advice. Then explaining and creating your simplest solution to that product is key. So that's what the MVP is. It's just your simplest solution. And so you can use a lot of different tools for building products. A lot of these are web, low-code, or no-code tools like Notion, Framer, Airtable, and Webflow, and Firebase and React. Firebase and React are more higher level, not higher level coding, but, well, actually they are higher level coding languages, but they're more code-heavy languages and projects versus using Webtable, or Webflow and Airtable is lower code. So essentially you want to investigate what are the tools that I need to get this product at least prototyped and come up with a plan for how do I scale the product later. So next thing, we'll just jump into development tools and frameworks. These are just popular tools for developing with. And so the first thing I always like to present is I have this Venn diagram I created on the different schemas when it comes to developing. You have web development, which you have your Web3, not Web3 in terms of blockchain, but in terms of you have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You also have Ruby, PHP, Golang, C#, Python, and all of these are pretty much used for web development in some way. You have your mobile development, which shares JavaScript and TypeScript, and you have Java in there. And you can build mobile developments develop mobile applications either natively using Kotlin and Swift, or you can build them using more public code languages like C languages or Java. And then you have multi-use frameworks that are framework agnostic or platform agnostic, which are applications like Dart, which you can build Flutter applications with. You can also use Python, Go, and C# for desktop and web development. And then there's a bunch of different solutions for everything. And this really gets clarified when we look at the frameworks, where here we have our frameworks on the edges of these bubbles and the languages that our frameworks use inside of the bubbles. So this is a very high-level view of how languages and frameworks work together. Frameworks are a set of tools and libraries that we use to build out our application in these languages. So languages have very specific tools that we can use to build out web applications, mobile applications, or desktop applications. For example, natively, we can build out mobile applications with Swift, UI, or Kotlin's Android development platform. Or we can use Ionic, which uses JavaScript, TypeScript, and HTML to build mobile apps. We could also use React and the React ecosystem to build both a mobile app and a web app. Here you can see we can use Flutter and Dart to build both mobile and desktop. And then you can use, I think this is called Atomic? No, this is called Electron. Electron can be used to build with the web languages. So as we talked about, the web languages here, JavaScript and TypeScript, are the most versatile that we can use because you can use them both to build desktop apps, and you can also use them to build mobile and web apps. Meanwhile, you have things that are more niche, like you have Java here used with Java Spring to build a web app. So this would be back-end web connection for Java apps. Here you have Laravel being used in the PHP realm. You have Ruby on Rails. You have .NET with C#. And then you have Django, which is used with Python to connect Python applications. So from a very high-level view, there are lots of different frameworks and languages. But when you're looking at one to use for your product, you want to look at how niched is my product? Now, languages like JavaScript or TypeScript, they're so popular and so popularly used that it's really easy to find a developer, and it's cheap to find developers and engineers who know them. So these languages are really helpful to learn if you're a developer and you want to be multifaceted, or if you're starting a product or an MVP and you want to be able to hire developers for cheap. You want to know that there is a hiring pool and that they're not going to charge you top dollar for that development. On the other hand, you have more niched languages like Swift, Laravel, Kotlin, and Qt, which you can charge higher if you're a developer in these languages because there's more of a niched audience. Owners who are building startups with these languages will go ahead and pay higher because they have a more niched requirement, right? They require somebody who knows Laravel. So if you know Laravel, you could charge higher. It's just basic supply and demand. So depending on where you are in this ecosystem, you can either charge higher or charge lower, or you can basically spend more or less. I always recommend building out your web apps with JavaScript, TypeScript, HTML, and CSS because those are pretty standard. And you have a bunch of different frameworks that use that same package. If you're building a mobile app and you want it to move into a desktop direction, Flutter's been catching on a lot lately. But then in terms of mobile development, if you're only looking to build for iOS, build with Swift. If you're only looking to build with Android, build with Kotlin. And then in terms of desktop development, I typically build with Flutter these days. But you can build with Qt if you know Python. You can also build with macOS's package here if you're only looking to target macOS. So a couple hosting and deployment tools. So when you're looking to build an application, you want to host your application on some kind of host, right? So we have Vercel, Netlify, GitHub Pages. Those all host serverless or just general web hosting. So these are for your web apps. These are great when you're building an Angular application or a React application, React.js. On the other hand, if you're looking to host your backend, you want to use a virtual machine or containerize or serverless your application out. These are all three different architectures that we've talked about a lot in previous meetings. Virtual machines are where you just run your code and you have a dedicated virtual machine with a dedicated operating system for your application. This is much more resource heavy and intensive, and it costs you higher. But again, for niched applications, it's important to go down this route. Then you have containers. Containerization simplifies things because instead of having to have a whole dedicated operating system, like a virtual machine, all you have to have is a container runtime installed on the server. So this simplifies things because you can have multiple applications running in parallel, but they're isolated in what we call containers. And then finally, you have serverless. Serverless is where you miniaturize your code into small compute functions that can be hosted via containers on cloud premises. And so serverless is super helpful because the cloud provider will be able to containerize it for you. All you have to do is drag and drop your function, and it'll package and deploy. The nice thing about serverless is that you only get charged for the compute time that you use. So if you only have 5 minutes of uptime in a whole day, you're going to be charged only for 5 minutes of uptime. Versus with containers and virtual machines, those have to run all the time to be readily available. And in that case, you're getting charged for compute time 24 hours a day. Which means, let's say your user only uses your application for 5 minutes a day. Then in that case, you're losing a lot of money. So when it comes to availability, it really depends on complexity. If your application is super complex, you're going to want to go with something more like a virtual machine or containerization versus super simple applications, you're going to want to go serverless. So before we move on, what kind of applications are y'all working on? I'm guessing you're working on more Python and scripted applications?
I'm working on things for my own internal deployment, not to sell at this time.
Okay, so like internal deployment, you'd want to go with something super basic. So what I always recommend is if you're trying to store data and have persistence, use something that's like a serverless API and connect to it. Or containerize your application if you want to be able to spin it up, especially AI. if you want to spin it up and be able to have it running on a server, having it in a container and being able to deploy it readily like that, it makes your application code more deployable by providing you with a transferable container which holds all of your code instead of having to actually send a bunch of source files. And then it also makes it more effective, that kind of deal. What about the rest of y'all? What kind of applications are y'all working on?
I'm writing the front ends, mostly HTML, Tailwind, and just vanilla JavaScript, and then the back end. Well, the containers are in Nginx. I got custom x86, 64 written, do that really tiny, and then there's some Golang infrastructure as well as some Fast API infrastructure.
Nice. Do you are you hosting on AWS or?
No, I got stuff on Railway, and then I've got my backup servers on GCP.
Nice, nice. So essentially, you've containerized your application, and then you hooked up an API gateway to it, kind of deal. Or did you build out your own kind of API gateway?
What do you mean by API gateway?
Just like the general set of API. Like, did you go through? I don't know if Railway gives you an API gateway interface, or if you just programmed it using like Express or.
Railway has like a reverse terminating proxy at the container level. I think it's on layer 4 or layer 7, and so it forwards all traffic on a given port out into a specific internal IP address that you can map with DNS records to whatever domain that you want to access that network from. And as far as like actually the ASGI server that handles TCP, UDP and stuff, that's handled by Fast API under the hood, and the way that works is
Okay, Fast API.
Yeah, it's got it'll scan your code base for what do you call them, like the little decorator functions on top of functions I want to expose, and then it'll do basic REST stuff to those.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was meaning more in terms of like some cloud platforms will provide a infrastructure as code solution to be able to essentially set up APIs and really simply, but Fast API is more coded than low code, and yes. Okay, that's awesome. Do any of y'all have any other projects you'd like to talk about? Yes.
Well, we have an SDK for mobile. We we're in the process of porting it to desktop.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, we want to put the same as a daemon at the OS level.
That's awesome.
What do you recommend?
Bringing it onto desktop. And is this the same application you were working on like a year ago?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so you're thinking about moving from, you have it working on mobile?
Yeah.
And you're wanting to move to desktop?
Yes.
And so we're talking about like hosting and backend. What do you have your backend written in right now?
JavaScript.
JavaScript?
AWS. But
Okay, nice.
the SDK, we license to developers that want to put the technology in their apps.
Okay.
So there will be no hosting for that.
Yeah, it just needs to be like open-ended. And so everything's in JavaScript. So you could just do a super simple Express app, right?
For
with
the
API.
mobile, we did Swift and Kotlin.
Okay, gotcha. And that's just for your mobile, like the one that's protecting your data and like is connected, right?
Yeah,
And
it uses
then
biometrics continuously.
yeah. So it's like essentially what Benito's working on is he is working on an application with continuous biometrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always checking your person to make sure that it's you who's using your device, who's doing the actions that you're doing, to be able to protect your data. So that, say you step away from the screen, you step away from your computer, somebody can't get on there and access without your actual biometric feedback. That's super cool. And you've got it working, your prototype on mobile, and then what you'd essentially do is just set up an API to your back end and be able to do all the processing through that API, or?
No, locally. Right now, I have a POC on Python.
Okay, gotcha.
The demonstration is a web app. I mean, it's like a web browser, and if you're not there, it obfuscates. When you come back, it continues.
Yeah. So is it like did you create the web browser, or are you just adding in a plugin for a web browser?
No, from scratch. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Well, it's a web view, so it's not a full browser. So.
Okay, yeah, and like it could be though, right? And that's the cool thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you're hosting on AWS. Did you containerize your app, or are you using
not at this
EC2?
time, but yeah, we plan to.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so like I was saying, we've talked a lot about architecture in the past, and there are kind of three main frames of thought. There is putting something on an EC2 instance, or your virtual machine, where it has a whole dedicated operating system. Then you have containers, which just put it in a container which is isolated from other programs on a container runtime. And then you have serverless, where you're really narrowing down each one of your actions into functions, and you're not using and dedicating a whole server or even a portion of that server for it. It's just spinning up and running whenever you need it. And the issue with serverless is that you have higher uptime, so it takes a minute for it to spin up, but once it's spun up, it stays warm for that configurable amount of time, meaning that you can access it for a certain period without it having to spin up again, and you only get charged for the time that it's actually up and running. So next we have some development tools. You have user authentication like Firebase, Supabase, Auth0, and ClerkDev. And then you have databases. Supabase uses Postgres. It's my favorite when it comes to relational databases, because they have a very flexible, free policy. And then you have a couple other databases like Neon and PlanetScale. You also have non-relational databases like Firebase, which is very popular, and MongoDB Atlas. Both are very popular because both have free tiers that are very accessible and reasonable. And then you also have like AWS also has, I forget what theirs is called, DynamoDB, which is their non-relational. And then they have a relational as well. I don't believe they're relational. AWS, is it their SQL database, RDS? I don't think that it's under their free tier, but we'll cover that in a second. And then in terms of object storage is where you're actually saving data in the form of images, files, etc. And so object storage, there is Cloudflare, Backblaze. AWS's S3 is covered by their free tier, and Supabase also has storage options. So a lot of these applications and tools have free tiers that can be accessible when you're prototyping. And again, when you're prototyping, you just want to iterate as fast and efficiently as possible. So the difficulty is balancing between speed and cost. It might be faster to develop everything on AWS because you're using one ecosystem, but it might be cheaper to use Supabase for your relational database, and then using AWS's infrastructure to maybe host your application. Because let's say RDS isn't in part of their free tier, then in that case you might want to use the relational database from another application or another program instead. So it really depends on what you're looking for. But these are some basic development tools that you're going to need to start off your application. User authentication, of course, allows you to log in. So it's that login database that stores login information and sensitive user information. And then you have databases that can store general information and object storage to store files. Other development tools are agentic AI, which is very important these days for setting up autonomous workflows and AI agents. These are very important when you want to have a more generalized use of AI in your application. You also have LLMs like OpenAI's ChatGPT models and other models there when it comes to like DALL-E for generating images, as well as some of these other providers such as Anthropic, Cohere, Mistral, Hugging Face. Hugging Face is, I believe, open source. So depending on where you want to go with your application, you might have to set up the infrastructure yourself to be able to run and supply it. But a lot of these LLMs are free to use as long as you can set it up on infrastructure yourself. Others are more managed, like OpenAI. OpenAI, you have to go through their API to contact their models, but it might be simpler. And if you're not having it used by a whole lot of customers right off the bat, it might be cheaper. So again, you're balancing out the speed of development with the cost of development. Email is another important thing. People take this for granted, but whenever you sign up for an application, you get an email. Whenever something new happens on your application, you get an email. Whenever somebody wants to market to you, you get an email. So you have to have an email provider, and which is called an email client. An email client allows you to send emails from your application. Some really popular ones are Mailgun, SendGrid, Postmark. Resend and Button Down are others that I haven't heard so much about, but they are popular out there. And then you also have other email clients like AWS's SES, which are very easily integratable with AWS services, but less easily integrated with custom applications. You have to go through their SDKs, and it can get to be a little bit more of a formal process. Also, the downfall of using AWS's SES is that they limit your access until you're able to formally request production access. And what production access requires is it requires that you show them that you know everything about how those emails are getting sent in order to have free approval to be able to email whoever you want from that. So AWS can be a little bit challenging to use in terms of email, but it's also the cheapest solution. You also have payment clients. So Stripe is a popular one. You have Lemon Squeezy, you have PayPal. A lot of these are really common names. And essentially what these allow you to do is they allow you to process payments, to have people pay automatically through these processors, and to be able to manage your inventory and selling points. And there are different plans for each of these integrations, whether you're trying to manage inventory or you're just trying to have somebody pay for a service.
Have you heard of Visa getting into this business?
I've heard that Visa typically works on the back end of these providers, but I haven't heard of them actually providing their own application. Do you know if they've provided their own API yet?
No, but I talked to a guy that wasn't shipping for Visa, and they were talking about that.
Really? That would be really cool though, because I feel like they would actually dominate this field. And the reason why is because everybody knows Visa, right? Just like everybody knows MasterCard and the other providers. So if they were to get their foot in the door, I feel like Visa probably backs one of these companies or definitely has, long-term investments. But if they were to actually move into this space and have their own payment provider and processor, they would be able to really move up quickly. So it is something interesting to keep tabs on. And then communication is another important bit, because you have email, but no communication like Twilio and other messaging services allow you to send SMS messages and also communicate through your application, through API endpoints and webhooks. So all of these super important development tools. So low-cost development options, these are essentially your basic free tier options. For example, there are serverless platforms that are very low cost or free even. I use Vercel typically, and I set up a serverless application and deploy you can use Fast API, you can use Express, you can use a bunch of different frameworks for this, and you can deploy yourself. The issue I've run into with Vercel is that they only let you have a certain number of files because every file gets turned into a function. So with that being the case, you really just have to modularize your code and have all your code in one file. It can get kind of annoying, but that's with their free tier. If you want to actually pay, they let you have, I think, at least 100 functions, if not more. So it's really great if you're building a serverless app, but you have to kind of strategize. And if you do run into a paywall with a lot of these applications and a lot of these tools, there are a lot of times ways to get around it. You just have to look at the right forums, you have to ask the right questions, you have to talk to the right people. And a lot of times there are ways to get around the paywalls by making your app more efficient. The thing is, you spend more time to make things cost less. So again, you're building an MVP, you gotta assess how much time do I have? Do I wanna go the efficient route, or do I want to go the money-saving route? I usually opt for the money-saving route, but that's just me. And so you have other applications and platforms. Another really popular one is Firebase, and Firebase has Google Cloud has a very generous free tier. But when it comes to applications and the free tiers, I typically go for AWS's application and setup because that's used a lot in larger scale and scaled apps. Google Cloud is also popular, but I haven't heard it used in the same spaces that I typically live in, which are, I do a lot of, I've done DoD work, I've done R&D work, I've done a lot of these bigger, more robust applications that typically use AWS in the back end. And then finally you have databases, which are your basic data storage units. You have Supabase, which is my favorite, using PostgreSQL, and it provides authentication and storage, which is really nice. It's a great alternative if you don't want to use Firebase, because Firebase, I believe, gives you a limited free tier that is for a limited time, versus Supabase is free as long as you don't exceed their storage requirements. You also have PlanetScale, which I haven't worked with personally, but they're MySQL compatible, and they have branchable databases with a free tier version. You have MongoDB for non-relational databases, so that's a really, really popular one if you don't want super structured data, because relational databases work in tables. They're very structured. Non-relational databases or NoSQL databases work by using objects as storage. And then you have Airtable. This is kind of an honorable mention where they're not a very formal database provider, but they provide really relaxed databases when you want to also have a connectable form. For example, you can connect Airtable to Fillout. And Fillout is a free form provider where you can just create basic forms. At the end of this meeting, I'm gonna ask that y'all fill out a feedback form just to tell us how we did and what we can do better for our meetings, what kind of topics you'd like presented, etc. And that's made with Fillout, which is free, and it's super easy to set up. You can connect it to Airtable, and then Airtable has an API to access it as a database. So it's an honorable mention. I wouldn't implement this as the back end for any heavy-duty app. But if you're building something quick, you want something that's free, Airtable gives you a lot of free options for something that you might not need to use all the time. And then finally, we have authentication and users. You can use Auth0, you can use Supabase's authentication, clerk.dev. These all have free tier options. For example, Auth0's popular, and you can have up to 7K users for free. And then you have storage, which you can access through Firebase or Supabase. Both of those are really popular storage options. You also have AppWrite, which is an all-in-one backend for databases, storage, authentication, and cloud. Again, very similar to Supabase. Supabase also offers serverless functions as well. For general purpose hosting, you can use, we talked about Railway. Railway I've used a couple times for containerized applications and serverless applications. Railway is super sweet when you want to pay a low cost for, they don't offer like a free tier. Well, actually they do. But what it is great for is that they provide database, storage, and backend for a low cost. So I believe their $5 a month tier is really cheap, and you can also run a container, you can also hook it up to storage, and you could also, I believe, hook it up to a database as well and have a connected solution for very, very cheap. I believe it was only $5 a month, and that's super cheap for hosting. So that's my go-to when I'm prototyping. For example, what I used it for was I was building an OCR app, and I just needed a compute service that could receive API requests and store files and objects effectively. And so I hooked that up for my backend, deployed it, super lightweight container, and then I could go in there and access all my logs and files. On the other hand, you have some of your general purpose hosting platforms like Heroku, which is very popular, Fly.io, and Render. Render's become more and more popular. I've heard it mentioned a lot lately. And then you have containers and virtual machines. These are harder to get access to, especially for free tier applications. But Oracle does provide a free tier for their Oracle Cloud, which is less heard of compared to Google, AWS, and Azure. You have AWS's Lightsail, which isn't completely free, but it's cheaper. It's $350 per month, which is great, and it's pretty simple and robust. And then you also have DigitalOcean, which uses Droplets as their small scale hosting. And those are only $5 per month, similar to Railway's hosting scheme. And then you have Koyeb, which is kind of an honorable mention. I haven't heard about its usage a lot, but they're newer. And they give serverless options for your backend as well. And then I believe this is the last one, having static hosting. Vercel and Netlify are pretty popular because they're completely free. So when you're talking about building a React site or a Vue site or Angular, typically these are hosted on Vercel or Netlify for free. Other alternatives are Cloudflare and GitHub's Pages, which allow you to integrate with GitHub directly. So do Vercel and Netlify. So really it's not super different. They all try to compete in this area because they also sell other services, and you can pay for a paid tier for more advanced options. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is AWS optimization, because AWS is used in a lot of applications, and depending on how you set it up, it'll either cost you a lot of money or it'll be super cheap. There is, in fact, a free tier involved here. So you can get the free tier and use it, and it starts the minute you get an AWS account, and it lasts one whole year. So AWS has a lot of different options. It can be pretty complicated, and that's why it's a mention in this presentation, because it gets to be a lot very quickly. They do have a cost explorer that allows you to analyze how much an application is going to cost you before you actually deploy it. But it's not always the best estimate, and it can be difficult to estimate when you haven't actually deployed it and have real user traffic on your application. So a lot of times you just have to deploy and see. Provided that you are able to launch your MVP and get that out there and move forward with a more formalized product, you can start fitting your instances, so that compute instances that you're using, you can start fitting them more and more narrow to what you actually need. When you use a compute instance, such as EC2, which provides a virtual machine, you typically want to generalize and get something that works just right for your product without too much overhead, but without a resource cap that's going to become an issue for your application. So this is an iterative process that as you build out your application, you want to find the better and better right size for your EC2 instance. Implementing auto-scaling is important for adjusting how many of your applications are spun up for the demand that you need. So say you only have one person that uses it. You only want one, if not zero, and just have to spin it up on the spot instance at a time. I believe the minimum instance for EC2 is one, but you could set it up so that it only has one at a time. Say you have 100 people who use it on and off. Maybe you only have 20 instances that spin up on one time, but you have it auto spin up another 20 after those 20 are occupied. You can program all of that in with AWS. And then additionally, you have savings plans and reserved instances for long-term usage, but you have to basically commit to using EC2 or AWS for a long period of time. AWS's savings plans, these are kind of their basics. You have a flexible model for 1 or 3 year terms. You also have savings plans for compute, and specifically for EC2, based off of region, family, or operating system. So it really depends on case to case. You also have reserved instances, and these are similar. You reserve a 1 or 3 year term, and you can get a discount. And these are for specific reserved instances, so they're specific to size and family of the compute product. And then you have based on zone and region, and so this is when we're talking about EC2. But what's most important is really the free tier, for me at least, and when you're building an MVP, I believe that that's most important. The free tier provides a limited set of resources across various AWS services, and it's intended to help users get started without having a lot of charges. So it's essentially has 3 different offers. You can get always free. These services are always free under certain resource caps. So you have AWS Lambda, which gives you 1 million free requests and 400,000 gigabyte seconds of compute time per month, always free. AWS's DynamoDB gives you 25 gigabytes of storage and 25 write capacity units and 25 read capacity units, which is the input-output request units and the amount that you can have at once. And so this is always free as well. Amazon Cognito also gives you 10,000 monthly active users each month for free. CloudWatch is 10 custom metrics. SNS gives you 1,000 notifications or publishes per month free. And then CloudFront gives you at least 1 terabyte data transfer out and 10,000 or 10 million requests for free as well. So all of these are scalable resources that are free all the time. Now, when you exceed them, that's when you start incurring costs. So that's why you want to set up, for example, CloudWatch to be able to watch how much of a usage you have per application. So this is your basic always free tier. These are really great when you're starting your application. The thing is, getting into AWS has a lot of overhead because you have to set it up right. And setting it up right can be complicated. You have to set it up with the right user permissions, using the practice of least permission, which basically means the principle of least permission is you give somebody only the access that they need. Things like that can be a little bit more difficult, and AWS's system is a little bit heavy. It's very deep. So the products we've looked at so far are always free. Then you have 12-month free plans, where starting when you open up your account to a year in, these are always free resources. And then at a year, you start incurring costs. And so you can have free EC2 micro instances. You can, for up to 750 hours per month. You can use RDS for up to 750 hours per month, I believe, as well. You have S3, which will give you 5 gigabytes of storage for a year. And you can do at least 2,000 GET requests, or 20,000 GET requests, 2,000 PUT requests. And I think that this is total. No, I think this has got to be per month. EBS is the elastic block storage, and that gives you 30 gigabytes of storage and 2 million input outputs. Glacier is their long-term storage, and you can have for free 10 gigabytes of data retrieval and storage. Then there's data transfer, which is their, I believe, input-output system. And then they have their elastic load balancer, which allows you to balance your applications. And that gives you a number of hours per month and certain processing power. And then you have SES, which is their email service, which is free for the first 12 months for up to 62,000 outbound emails per month. So all of these are on a fixed per month scale. And some of these resources are really cheap, even when you get out of this year-long period of free tier. For example, Amazon SES is only like 10 cents for every 10,000 emails you send. So you send 10,000 emails in a month, and it's all under 10 cents, right? Not even per email 10 cents, it's 10 cents flat. So super cheap in the long run. The issue is that a lot of getting into Amazon puts you into a problem called vendor lock, where you could get stuck only using Amazon because you're too reliant on their system. And it's very difficult to change cloud providers once you start. You have to really think about that beforehand. Finally, AWS has some trials that allow you to demo some of these applications. So Amazon Chime has a free trial on their SDK, Lightsail, which gives you, I think we had just covered that. Low-key, I believe they're containerized instances, 750 hours of Lightsail for 1 month, right? Amazon Pinpoint is, I believe, notifications. And then SageMaker is for their model training and AI solutions. And SageMaker gives you 250 on the micro instance under a trial. So these are their kind of like limited offerings, and they're not always the best, but they give you at least a test trial on these applications so you can get them integrated and make sure that they fit right. Finally, we have storage optimization, which allows us to store intelligently. So you have S3 Glacier and S3's other options, which allow us to essentially get lower prices on on the data we store based on how often we access it. So Glacier is for long-term storage, and that's based off of, hey, I'm not going to be accessing this item for a long time, so I want cheaper cost, right? Because there's less input-output. Enabling S3 lifecycle policies is important to delete data that is expired or old. And then you have elastic block storage for volume optimization, deleting volumes that you don't need, so deleting storage capacity that you're not using. And then in terms of compute optimization, you have spot instances that run at significant discounts because they're not critical and they take a long time to spin up, but you don't have them running all the time. You can also use serverless, which I approve of and recommend for reducing cost. And containerizing can also reduce cost because you're not having to dedicate a whole operating system to running your application. And then finally, we have low-code or no-code solutions. This has become a lot more important, especially in modern day, because everybody's using AI and these applications to build their products. AI is becoming more accessible, so there's a lot of products for building things like other applications with it. So the first thing is code boilerplates. A lot of these providers provide you with pre-made boilerplate code that you can just use as a basis for your application and move with from there. So boilerplate code will save up your startup time. It'll help you set up configuration from day one, and it really just allows you to focus on the product, not the back end that's going to go into it, the very complicated bits. And so you can find this on GitHub. You can find this on a couple of different websites and resource pages. Interface templates are also important. They give you the UI layout, and you can use modular interfaces for your application, so you can take a lot of these templates and customize them for your needs so that you don't have to worry about making your app look really nice. You use these custom templates to make it look nice and also familiar. Somebody can look at it and say, hey, look, I've seen this layout before. It's familiar to me, so you don't have to hire a UI UX designer to get you beautiful mockups. Tailwind gives some really great templates. Some other options are Bootstrap Made, UI Deck, FlowByte, and Theme Forest. And a lot of these are customized for using with Tailwind or with a specific framework. So you've got to look into what framework you're using, and this does influence what framework you use in the long run. And then you have low-code or no-code options. When it comes to building websites, a lot of people use Webflow these days. Back in the day, a lot of people used Wix or would use WordPress or a lot of those options, which are more low-code or no-code. But modern day, a lot of people use Webflow or Framer. And these are visual website or app builders where you can drag and drop different processes or different parts of your website. Super simple, and you can build apps and websites with Webflows for websites, Framers more for apps. Then you have Bubble.io. Bubble.io is another really popular one these days. This is a full stack no code app creation option where you can use AI to build out a full stack application. Glide's another really popular one these days. You have Airtable, which is spreadsheet as a database. So like I was saying, it's kind of like a database, but it also connects spreadsheets to it, and you can connect it to Google Sheets or other applications like Fillout, where the cool thing is that you can have a pipeline from Fillout, where you fill in the forms, to Airtable, which holds the data as a database, to Google Sheets, which then holds the data on a Google Sheet, and you can apply mathematical processes and script with it. Zapier and Make are both Connect services that automate tasks. Retool and AppSmith are low-code internal tools for API. And then you have Thunkable and Adalo, which are no-code mobile apps. And so all of these are different platforms that you can build applications with without actually having to know the heavy nitty-gritty parts of coding. The one danger of using these platforms is that they could be oversimplified at times, and if you don't have a knowledge of the architecture of applications, you could get in over your head. But the thing is that if you're not a programming developer and a programming founder, using these to start your MVP, super great. And that pretty much brings us to the end. Last thing to talk about is communities. Communities like Hispanic Hackers, Capital Factory, and other networks are really great for getting off the ground. We'd like to thank Capital Factory for hosting us and giving us a space to be able to talk, network, meet, and hang out. And so if you're looking for community, this is a really great place to get your membership. Their membership is a little pricey, but it's worth it. I co-work a lot in this building, and it's really great when you want to build out a network, meet new people, and get connected and resources. And then if you're looking to host an event, you can also host an event through their request form, which is pretty great. And they also have a newsletter for staying up to date on the next meetings. And that's about it. If you don't mind, please fill out your attendance. This just helps us know how many people came to the meeting, what we can do better, what kind of meetings y'all would like to see in the future. And if you have any ideas for future meetings that you'd like to see, if you're a super technical person and you want to see a meeting on Docker, Kubernetes, and containerization, put that in there. If you're a founder and you want to see something more on no-code, low-code strategies, and you want to hear something about Bubble.io, put that in. If you want to learn more about AI, let us know. Because all of those are that's helpful insights for us to know how we should direct our meetings and what was most helpful for y'all. And so this takes us to just generally chatting about each other's projects. If y'all brought a resume to have looked at or a tech stack or want to talk about your project, feel free to bring it to our attention. And yeah, that's pretty much the rest of the meeting. Thank y'all for coming, and I appreciate y'all coming out. And if you want to get connected, let's get connected, because there's a lot we can build together. So yeah. Sweet. We have a good amount of time in this room, I think, left. So, yeah, has anybody, I know some of y'all brought stuff to talk about. I know that a couple of y'all came in a little bit later. Is there anything specific that y'all have on your minds?
How about, the boss about using agents, versus, to automate tasks, Some people are saying, for example, that deploying support calls, right? That can use voice to have the same thing that a personal agent, using their decision tree when helping out troubleshoot. That agent can do that, right?
Yeah.
But some of the things are not as easily deployable as some people might think,
Yeah.
because it needs to know your product and you need to train it, right? Have you gotten any people who are working on that kind of stuff here as members, or anybody who knows anybody who's interested in talking about that, or?
I know a UT professor. He does like a AI bootcamp right now. Super helpful connection. Let me see if I forget his. Oh, Ariel. He's part of our. He's come to a couple of meetings and he has talked at our meeting. Ariel Gamino. He's super great to talk to. He works a lot in AI. I know agentic AI is becoming a more and more big deal. And what I always tell people is that you want to narrow down your decision-making tree and the outcomes of your decisions first, and then you gotta implement it. I think in the terms of using it for customer service, it's totally doable. You have a list of goals, right? A list of outcomes that you can provide the AI with, and you can give them specific scenarios and train them on specific scenarios to use it. And as long as they have a LLM connected to them, or an LLM component, they can hear out the request and then find an answer. And like that would really help with the annoying telephone calls where you get on the call and they just send you back and forth with a machine.
Or even market research, my sister for the longest time, she was a marketing researcher, she just freelanced, Procter & Gamble and General Mills come up with a new product, they have a whole bunch, in a conference room, 8 consumers.
Yeah.
And they ask them, hey, what do you think about the new flavor of Betty Crocker? Or what do you think, how do you use Thai, how does it work? Right, and they talk about it and they either slam or praise the product.
Yeah.
And she made a good amount of money by just hosting or hosting these meetings, right? And
Yeah.
you can write down, take a video. You could do that over the phone too with agents, but nobody's really deploying that yet.
Yeah. Agentic AI is, I feel like, the newer frontier right now, because I feel like we started with basic AI, right? TensorFlow, PyTorch, that kind of thing. It was really nitty gritty until it started getting used a lot more, and then you have all these, TensorFlow functions and these open source models like Hugging Face models, and then you move into LLMs where it's like now we can chat with AI and have things created. But the next frontier is now we have increased reasoning and agents that can do things, and that's where it's like actually a sandbox. That's like the playground. So I do feel like it's a newer concept.
So I would like to apply all the things that you talked about earlier. How do you apply it to a product? How developing a product for marketing researchers.
Yeah.
Instead of hiring somebody like my sister.
Yeah.
Just, hey, there's this module, and send out. Some marketing companies have a panel, right? A whole bunch of consumers they hire. They tell, hey, we'll give you free coupons, or we'll give you keep you in our database of users to reach out to whenever you have questions. So sometimes they'll get free products or whatever.
Yeah.
Have a database of those people, and then hey, create a new marketing research project and deploy it in 10% of your.
That's such a profitable idea, I think.
I'd look backwards. I'd go and see if you can figure out a bunch of examples of all the documents that someone has to report every week. Maybe literally shadow your sister and figure out what, literally line by line, record all the meetings she goes through, and exactly what gets said there, and come up with, 1,000 pages or so of just, this is the content, this is the type of content that we need to, ingest, and then break that down by just category, maybe stack rank it by, okay, what seems important here, what do people have big reactions to, what is too complicated to automate, what is too simple to automate, and then you could obviously reach out to design and try and, you could maybe even mock up yourself design. I'm a big fan of, you gotta build everything from the MVP yourself before you start hiring somebody. So if you wanna hire a salesman, go do some sales. If you wanna hire an engineer, write some code.
Yeah.
Do you wanna assist your sister or replace your sister?
Replace her. I mean, not her, but her function, right?
Yeah.
Right? That's the idea.
I think it's very doable, but you gotta start with, like, end goal is we're going to make an application that can ask users and retrieve user feedback in a way that's engaging and user-friendly, right? With agentic AI automating that process. So you'd audit your sister, figure out what she talks about, what she needs, what her goals are, and what's the end goal. And then you'd connect an LLM and an agent that would be able to use the LLM to ask questions and reason based off the questions with a certain outcome. So you'd have some kind of stored goal, end goal, some kind of outcome. And then the cool thing is there's so much exploration. You could use AI to analyze how confident somebody sounds, right?
Right, sentiment analysis.
Yeah, you could use it based off of their tone. Like when I get excited about something, I talk really fast, and you can see differences when they introduce themselves versus when they get excited. And you can analyze that.
Yes.
And you can do research patterns on behavioral patterns, basically. And that would be really interesting. And that's an MVP would just be, let me create an app that uses agentic AI to ask people a series of questions and get user feedback. Coolest thing is that you could get user feedback on your app using the app, right? And then scaling would be, let me do a behavioral study on how people's voices sound and implement AI in that scheme of things. Let me add this function to my agentic AI where when they sound positive about the product, we'll send them a marketing message, right? But then the AI does it all for them and decides what kind of marketing message to send based off of their requests. And then maybe you add in another AI engine that would go ahead and create the marketing message and curate it for the user, right? Which could be all very interesting. A lot of exploration.
In one of these meetings, she takes notes, or I'm thinking that if the AI can, if you record the audio, then translate it, and then the LLM can go through it.
Yeah, it doesn't need to happen on the spot either. You could just record it and then take notes and then report them as well. And that's the other thing is, like, for me, I'm starting to want to, given the amount that I use AI every day, which is crazy, but it's the new jump in our industry right now. I would love to have a notebook that just has a log of everything I've done. I just saw this LinkedIn post that this kid who's going viral, who got kicked out of a famous university, is going viral because he got kicked out for creating like a software that can help you cheat job interviews. And his whole company just got funded to create an AI that's always watching and listening to everything you do and taking notes on it and continuously developing off of it so that it knows everything about you so it can help in all facets of your life. I think that's really great because I know that ChatGPT knows half of the things going on in my world and can give me analyses about myself, but I don't want it to listen to me while I'm on the toilet. Let's be honest, like, that's just, I don't want that. You know, when I bring my phone into the bathroom, I don't want it listening to me, like, in my conversations with my mom. You know, things like that I want off limits, and how do we limit that, right?
Well, people don't realize that Alexa is listening all the time. You put it on your, so you're having a fight with your girlfriend, your wife, and Alexa is speaking and everything else. Of course, it does not do anything with it, right?
Yeah.
But some
Yeah.
people are very uncomfortable with that.
I might get some ads for divorce lawyers if you start having an argument. Let's see. I don't know, I talk to and then I'll look at my phone, I'm like, hey, here goes it. But sure enough, I got like 5 ads and they're all exactly relevant to just what I was talking about. So somewhere, someone decided to pick up my voice and use that in some sort of system.
Or like before, like you want to Google something and like you're thinking about it, and then like that's the next thing that's on the chat, which is really scary because I'm like, I didn't say it.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, then you will argue that things that you're thinking of,
Yeah.
influence your searches and your
Yeah, the algorithm. picks
the
it up.
algorithm.
Yeah.
So it's related to how you've done in the past, as opposed to what you say just now.
Mhm.
But it's still
Yeah.
there are some apps that do use what you say. Right? We're talking
Yeah.
about Alexa. We're talking about well, whatever they call it now, Google Assistant, or or Siri.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that like in our century, the algorithm has become like this personified thing. Like the algorithm gave me this, the algorithm gave me that, the algorithm gave me this Instagram feed,
It was
right?
the Matrix before.
That's right. Right.
But it's kind of cool. I know that there's a lot of data visibility in my life just in general,
Yes.
but companies can't really do anything with that other than market to you and create programs to market to you. They can't possibly store all of our data at once.
And also,
Yeah, I have not a separate question. Code security. So I wrote some code, and I have an SDK, and I'm gonna share it with these clients. Now I can give the executable, the object code, but if they need to modify it, they might need the source, or even the object. There are disassemblers that would take the executable and convert it back to JavaScript or whatever, right? So is there a way to obfuscate the code base so it's hard for them to reverse engineer it or disassemble it? How do you protect your code?
That's really tough because like you can compile it and transform it, but like at the end of the day, it is reversible to some extent. But it takes a lot of time and money to reverse it. That's the main thing. Is like when I think of reversing code, it's not something I could do very simply. Something that would take a lot of training and time and money. And I think it depends on what scale you're at. I'm sure that AWS or like Google has processes to be able to both descale and also prevent their code from being descaled or deconstructed.
You can also like solve that. Depends on the specific problem legally. You can be like, hey, this is what the code is for. Please pay me money for the code, and then you can have a red team, or you can put like a bounty and be like, hey, give me legal access to the code for $500, and then you can sue whoever gave you access to the code for $1,000.
Right.
Not that I would suggest that. Usually, there are plenty of profitable open source projects, so it might be less of a problem than you think, but you can definitely prevent people from using it.
My thing is, go ahead.
I'm thinking it depends on what is the code doing. If what the code is doing is extremely unique, then of course, right? That it's worth their while to to back you. But if it's something that it's cheaper to replicate than to.
Yeah, I mean, we have a patented quantum resistant encryption that's about 100 times faster than AES.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So.
Which is awesome. That's like crazy.
Yeah.
To think about. That is something that you do need to patent, and I don't even know, how do you protect that? I mean.
Because knowing if somebody else is using the code that's hard. You need to basically, I had a friend at MIT that he wrote a disassembler. Back then was Pascal. And, you know, some need a hardware key that you plug in, so you can go through the code and say, oh, here's what it calls jump. And
Yeah.
then it no longer needs the key, so.
A lot of like, if you wanna get really serious about it, a lot of DoD situations will just host the code locally. Like, spin up a GitLab instance, but host it on by yourself. And then manage your code locally and only in secure facilities.
That can get expensive though, you have to, maintain the, do it in the hardware, right? In terms
Yeah.
of, infrastructure.
Yeah, you need a small server set. And like a small server rack could cost you anywhere from like $2,000 to $50,000. So it can be a lot of money, but like if you're really worried, it's worth investing in because it's something that's like it's something that if your code did leak, you could.
So our code is like low code is like 6K. And now you can obfuscate, put a lot of junk in there, so it looks like 1 gigabyte or.
That's true, you could add a
And
lot
then
of junk to it, but even then, like when you compile it, only what you need is used, correct? Like when you compile the code, it just, the binary obviously shrinks.
You could spawn a process that goes through all the junk and does nothing.
Could you just self-host an API that has encryption service and decryption service and just don't explain how it encrypts or decrypts anything?
But then it coming in the data is visible, so it will have to be encrypted on site, inside the app or the device, so.
Like they obviously have traditional encryption methods, because you're trying to prevent like someone breaking the existing, so could you not have them send
And the
data encrypted with
the speed would be if it's local. Now if you have to go over the
just encrypt it twice?
yeah.
I think part of the issue is your application isn't hosted elsewhere, you're implementing it into other people's software.
Yeah.
And then you kind of lose it there. Unless you can put it on a backend, you can cloud host it or like host it yourself, right? I would say get your own server rack, hire a cloud developer who will be able to actually deploy it onto your servers for you and then connect it with an API.
I guess I could have like half of the key or a percentage of the key.
Yeah.
Instead, I mean, let's say 90% is generated locally and then 10% from a server.
Exactly. Just making a couple pieces of the puzzle missing.
Yeah.
Although it takes away from the efficiency, and that's the issue, right?
Because as it is, you can actually implement it on a microcontroller for IoT. So.
Yeah. You could just kind of, the only thing you could do is legally like have people sign like heavy NDAs maybe, when you implement it and implement it very closely. But you'd have to have like a very, that's a legal thing, right? You have to have a very.
Yeah, it's a legal thing,
You have patents though, right?
Yeah.
So that's.
Well, the UT has the patent.
Okay.
But we have the exclusive license.
It's a tough problem. I feel like, I personally believe that everything software-wise can be copied, or not just copied, but like also you can create it yourself. And that's why it's so difficult to patent software, but it takes time. And that's the thing, like, your application is made to be 100 times more efficient than the other ones on the market. So the amount of time it would take me to go and try to replicate that would be a long time. Unless I had it on hand.
The other thing is I think there's some stuff out there that already exists that's like resistant to encryption. But, someone reached out to me a couple of years ago when I was working at a place that had like sensitive healthcare data, and they were like pitching that.
Yeah, NIST had a competition and there were 4 finalists, and 2 of them were hacked. without a quantum computer.
That's crazy.
The encryption was broken, but yeah, there are already 3 of them that people can use commercially. So. But ours is
Better.
100 times faster. So.
Yep. And like, how many people have exposure to it? Like,
I mean, right now, if you put it on, I mean, we license it, so if somebody wants to put it in their app, everybody that uses the app
as
will have it inside the app. So, one, how to protect us from the client copying it, but also make sure that nobody can break
The users.
the users themselves.
Yeah, so the reason it has to be on the client side is because it has to always analyze the biometrics, right?
Yeah.
What I would do is, I would set up the most that you can for the back end, right? So put as much as you can in a back end, host it yourself if you're really worried about it, but if not, host it on the cloud, if you trust the cloud provider with your code. And then create like an SDK package that isn't completely patentable by itself, and neither is your back-end code, but together they are patentable. So it's like 2 puzzle pieces, and the SDK package would have to be, you gotta make as much as you can, put as much as you can in the back end, basically. It's just difficult. I don't know like the full scope of your project, but
Yeah, the biometrics is all local. The encryption right now is all local.
But
You need a key generation key. You share that once, and that's it. After that, all the keys are generated locally.
you could set up a key system though where it has to contact your backend and verify, and that could protect it if in order to generate the keys, it's reliant on a key that you have to provide.
Yeah.
So
I
like,
could do that, but then I have to connect to the internet every time.
yeah, and the internet
So
could
that's
expose it.
overhead. So.
But you could have in-transit encryption. It's a tough problem, but it's something that you could tackle with some. I would recommend hiring like a cybersecurity officer, honestly, somebody who like really knows their stuff, who has hacked before. Because I have never hacked before, and I know some things about cyber, but.
Really? You're in Hispanic.
hackers. I would love to learn how to properly hack.
I was a hacker.
Okay.
In another life.
This is
another
where
life.
I would been. Yeah. It's a tough problem. You have to.
35 years ago. So.
Systems have changed, but
Yeah.
we still use Unix. You know, so it's pretty much the same. You know, yeah. As long as we use Unix, TLS, not much is gonna change. You know. But another thing is like what we were saying, AI has changed a lot of the landscape. There might be some way to create AI cyber. Also, you have blockchain as well. I don't know if that could potentially be a solution, having like a distributed, I guess that puts it in the hands of everybody, but if it's distributed, not one person has the application with the full code.
Yeah, it could be distributed within your own set of servers.
Yeah, and like you could use a blockchain method to connect each part of the application, individual pieces or records that you maybe are using to generate the keys. Could be an interesting concept as well. Web3 is its own world these days.
So you're saying not blockchain publicly, but blockchain concept locally?
Yeah.
Each of the clients would store the key, but you would never be able to retrieve the key, but it wouldn't matter because it would just scale whenever a new user is added to the system. Is that?
Yeah, part of the patent has this concept of
The chain.
a set of servers where if I send you a message, or I send you a message, or I send him a message, if anybody's looking at my channel, it always goes to the same place. But although the final destination is different, so.
Blockchain is something that I'm trying to learn more of because it's becoming a more of a key technology, but it is still a niche. But it's something I'm into. Interesting concept. conceptually though. Okay, we do have to start packing up, because we have 10 minutes, and then, the cleaning crew will be coming in. But if y'all wanna continue the conversation downstairs, feel free to. Thank you all for coming, I appreciate y'all, and if you have any other questions, feel free to ask. If you want me to look over your resume, we can do that downstairs. More than happy to give feedback, and if y'all have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us online, over email, another meeting, etc.
Let me show you guys, our technology.
And if y'all have your car, did any of y'all park your car downstairs in the garage?
No, I
Sure. It's free.
Yeah, I know, you said it, I was reading, and then I read it later, oh, I can park for free, because I was looking for free parking around here.
Okay.
I park on the street, right,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, if you park downstairs, feel free to take these tickets.
Got it.
That gives you a fixed cap on how much it costs.
Yeah, it's very hard to find parking in Austin.
So we use biometrics to get on into our devices and some apps, but after that, you know, I give the phone to my wife, but she can't do anything, right? With our technology, I get in with my face, but if I put the phone down, and then it's looking for my face, but you're not Benito. I am Benito, so I'm back. And if somebody is behind me, you know,
Oh.
it goes off the face.
That's cool.
Yeah. Simple, but effective.
Yeah.
But you said, you work with the UT, so UT has a patent?
No, this is the company.
Oh, okay.
The encryption is UT.
Oh, I see what you mean, I see.
I used to be a professor at UT for 30 years.
Wow.
And after that patent, I thought, there is a lot of potential there, so I
Yeah.
decided to retire to commercialize it. So.
Yeah, makes sense. Especially for like Department of Defense, like all that type of stuff, you know, where like nobody can be looking at, you know, what's, you know, their monitor.
And what department were you in?
I was mechanical engineer, but
Let's start heading
I
downstairs.
some of the patents are IC circuits, so
got it.
I taught the first mechatronics course in the US.
Got it. You know, I have a friend, the husband of one of my wife's best friends from college. He is a professor in Sinaloa. He went to, he got his PhD at Arizona State.
Wait, what's that? Oh, no, I studied at Purdue in Indiana. Purdue University.